In tonight's face-off, the debate over the president's politics, performance, the results of last night's elections. Tonight, the White House says the Republican wins in both New Jersey and Virginia aren't a reflection on the president's policies. President Obama was not on any ballot last night, certainly, and he may have been, however, in the minds of some voters. Our guest for tonight's face-off debate, Matt Lewis, who writes for politicsdaily.com and for townhall.com. Good to have you with us, Matt. And Mark Halperin, editor-at-large, senior political analyst for Time magazine. Mark, good to have you with us. Well, let me just quote, if I may, gentlemen, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, one of my favorite people to quote. From my perspective, we won last night, and we had one race that we were engaged in. What do you think, Matt?
Well, I mean, technically speaking, she is right. As a Speaker of the House, there was one congressional race that was focused on New York 23, and they won it. But, look, I think it would be a mistake to overplay the significance of the national impact. But I think it's also a mistake to underplay it. Barack Obama went to New Jersey.
Finding that balance is so difficult, isn't it?
And I'm not surprised that Democrats would try to spin you. And this is what you say.
Democrats spin me.
And by the way, congratulations. You are Mr. Independent. And independents were the big story yesterday.
As I would have predicted had I been given the opportunity. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think the White House is being a little bit ham-handed and trying to make a big deal about that congressional race in upstate New York. I think the lessons there are not the way it's being spun for a variety of reasons, which we can get into. It was a bad day for incumbents. It was a bad day for Democrats who want to have a lock on independents, but they didn't. I guess I agree that we don't want to make too much or too little, but I think every 4 years we ritualistically make too big a deal of this day. I don't think this tells you much about the state of the health of the president, and I don't think it tells you anything about what happens next November.
All right. In following in that vein, let's talk about the role of independents here. Independents flipped precisely from 2008 in their support for President Obama in both New Jersey and Virginia. And I haven't seen any exit polls from District 23 in New York. But this was an obvious major shift on the part of independents who played a major role, if not the major role, in electing Barack Obama president.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it's astonishing numbers. Like 66% of independents in Virginia went to Bob McDonnell. And I actually have to take issue a little bit with Mark. I mean, I think that if it were just Bob McDonnell winning in Virginia, the Republican, then maybe it's not a big deal. But not only did the governor win in Virginia, the lieutenant governor won, the attorney general won, and the Republicans in the state house shellacked the Democrats. We have a deep blue state, New Jersey, with Governor Corzine, pouring in millions and millions of his own dollars getting beat. I just think it's really hard to overlook the fact that something big is happening out there. I don't want to call it a 93, analogy, but, it is.
A prelude to 94. What would you call it, Mark?
You might have to switch me over to the web if I'm going to be able to give the full answer. But just in brief, in terms of New Jersey, I'd say the only type of person who's
disingenuous lack of knowledge on your part about the medium you're in right now.
The only type of person who's less held in less regard than a former Goldman Sachs executive would be a current Goldman Sachs executive. You got John Corzine with his own personal problems. High taxes, property taxes, and the state having had Democratic administrations for a long time. Local issues. In Virginia,
well, I think the economy is a national issue.
Remember is,
I think
of course it is, but that doesn't mean it's going to be. But look, it was true before John Corzine lost. What's true now, which is if the economy's in bad shape, a year from now, on the eve of the midterms, you bet it's going to be bad for Barack Obama. But that's got nothing to do with John Corzine. The reality is,
it does have something to do with
Virginia,
Barack Obama, though.
You have to remember that a lot of the people who call themselves independents when they're talking to exit pollers are not registered independents. They might be registered Republicans. And the shift in independents, no doubt it occurred. But a lot of that shift is people who a year ago were calling themselves maybe Democrats, maybe Republicans. They weren't independents. Now they are. That makes the independent shift look a lot bigger.
Well, wait.
4 years ago, Democrats...
Mark. In New Jersey, for example, right now, unaffiliated or independent registrations outnumber either Republicans or Democrats. We are seeing precisely the same trend around the country. You're quite right that Republicans and Democrats may describe themselves as independent.